Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alastair.
And this fortnight we will be covering the new Netflix adaptation of Frankenstein, directed by Guillermo del Toro, and then we will be returning to the world of Gen V, the younger kids spin-off version of The Boys, which you'd really think should be called The Babies, but I digress. Alastair, what else have you been doing in the last fortnight?
So, I've been listening to an album that came out this year that I'm really keen to recommend to our listeners. It's been a very good year for new music, I think, between some great records from bands like Viagra Boys, Big Special, Dice Bits. There's been a lot of good music this year, especially if you're in that post-punk, guitar-based rock music, if that's like your thing. Certainly is my thing. I'd like to recommend an album that I feel isn't quite as high profile as some of the others and should get some more attention, which is the second album from Sprints, All That Is Over, which was a really surprise hit for me this year. Sprints are an Irish garage punk band based in Dublin. This is their second album after Letter to Self, which is their first one. And their first album was really good, a good sort of raw, sharp punk album. And they've done a lot of EPs and singles again in that vein. And I do like their music. But this album, which I expected more of the same, raw, sharp, exactly, angry, has really surprised me to be one of my albums of the year. Well, will most likely be one of my albums of the year when I do my list later on. I think they've really evolved their songwriting, which has really helped. So there's more than just angry shouting and short, sharp songs in this one. So I do really think if you're interested in your sort of guitar-based punk and post-punk music, this is something you should definitely check out.
So when you say they've evolved their sounds from short, sharp songs, what does that mean? Does that mean the songs are longer?
Yeah, there are definitely some longer songs.
Have they gone full prog?
I wouldn't go far as say full prog. I just, that would probably be a betrayal of their punk roots, I suppose. But there's a more prominent acoustic guitar presence on the album, certainly, which is quite interesting. There's some slightly more spectral sounding tracks, such as the opening track, Abandon. It's quite a prominent acoustic guitar bit, then into sort of more spectral, soundscapey To the Bone, which is the second, before they go into the first single from the album, which is the third track, Descartes, which is, again, then it goes back to short, sharp punk. So they're kind of mixing it up, different styles. There's some, that sound like more experimental and have these sort of sweeping soundscapes, especially Desire, the final track on the album, which, 6 minutes long, so that's pretty long for a
nice
punk song. They're definitely experimenting with sound and format a bit more.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I guess, we've all heard about second album syndrome, and I guess one of the main symptoms of second album syndrome is making an album that just kind of sounds like your first album again, but maybe not quite as fresh or good. So I guess if they're actually pushing things and trying new stuff on the second album, that's probably a good sign.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Whereas a lot of bands just repeat the same thing and it sounds a bit derivative. This album didn't chart as high as the first one in Ireland or the UK. I don't know if it's the punk's much preferred, something more sounding traditionally punk. But I really liked how they've kind of evolved the sound, made it more complex and interesting. For example, quite a few tracks have this sort of, what I describe as a very 60s sound. When you do an acoustic guitar over the top of an electric guitar, it's very distinctive. And they've used that a few times, which I like. They also do a lot of interesting things involving repeating lyrics. So one of my favourite tracks is Something's Gonna Happen, which just repeats the same few lyrics kind of over and over, but building each time to this sort of crescendo, which is really, really good.
As coincidence would have it, I saw Radiohead live at the O2 this week, and repeating the same phrase again and again for increasing effect is very much something they do.
Exactly, yeah. But it sounds like that was a spectacular show, the Radiohead. Definitely the other end of the spectrum from garage punk to a band that's kind of at the height of their power and with enormous fan base.
Yeah, no, it was good. I was at the very back of the O2, absolute top balcony back against the wall, so I couldn't really see the band particularly, but I could hear them very well. I'll give the O2 this. They've got a nice sound system.
Yeah. It's good that, Radiohead can still pack out the O2. I suppose, they were the band for music aficionados or music nerds to be into when I was 17, 18. I don't know if that was the height of their chart popularity or things like that, but they said they got a loyal fan base that stuck with them over the years.
Well, I mean, they had their height. I guess their height was probably, in terms of air quotes, mainstream popularity, was probably OK Computer, and then they famously pulled a Kid A by making Kid A, and I guess maybe swerved a bit away from mainstream rock. And I must admit, they didn't play a huge amount from Kid A, but they did play a lot of OK Computer and a lot of In Rainbows, actually, which I think is a record which doesn't get as much appreciation as it deserves for being one of the peak best Radiohead albums, because it came after Kid A and a lot of people had stopped paying attention to them by then. But In Rainbows is, I think, slightly underrated and extremely good. Anyway, this is not top relevant podcasting when I start rating what 10 old Radiohead albums.
Yeah. Well, we're aging millennials at this point, so yeah, we're engaging in some Radiohead nostalgia.
Well, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, you've been listening to an actually new band. Well done.
Yes, a new band with some young people in it, doing some young music. And things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's very much in this sort of like tradition of punk and garage punk that's been around for a while, which is, alive and well. I think post-punk is riding high in the alternative music scene, from everything from like bands we discussed like Viagra Boys, Big Special, Sleaford Mods, even more like kind of chart successful acts like Wet Leg, very much in the post-punk vein, which I do really like. Yeah, and I guess this is more of an archetypal post-punk album with the emphasis on the punk, in that, it's still got short, sharp songs, and it's still got a lot of angry lyrics and angry content, but in the classic way that like the early post-punk stuff like Joy Division, acts like that were evolving the punk sound. This is clearly an evolution of the punk sound. There's definitely stuff in here that you wouldn't really consider to be punk, but it's very informed by punk, so it just kind of falls into that giant bucket of post-punk, that covers everything from like Talking Heads through to Idols.
I do find, I guess I like post-punk because I seem to listen to a fair bit of it, but I do find the classification quite confusing sometimes, if only because it seems to cover an absolutely massive spectrum of stuff, from things that sound like maybe a slightly heavier version of the indie bands I listened to as a teenager, to like Sleaford Mods, which has no guitars at all, for the most part. So yeah, I do occasionally find it quite hard to describe what exactly it is to be post-punk, but I do seem to like it.
Yeah, it's just like an enormous genre. It's kind of hard to define because it's so unwieldy. It includes even stuff from the 80s. It was like new wave things that teeter into popular kind of synth music from the 80s and things like that. It's just very, very broad, LCD Sound System have been thrown in. There's like so many different bands, but yeah, it's I guess something that's like, I usually think an archetypal like post-punk band is something that's like heavier and edgier, shall we say, than your typical indie. Like, I don't know if you describe Idols as an indie band, or even like Fontaines DC. There's just like that bit more edge to it. I guess like Sleaford Mods, the thing with them, it's always like post-punk electronica or something like that, or post-punk hip-hop. Like to say the fact that like, yeah, this is kind of post-punk influenced, but also has all these like other elements to it, like the fact that it's just a guy with a laptop on stage and an MC.
Yeah, and again, that's quite a broad leap from a classification that also contains bands which are just a few people on stage playing guitars, but whatever works. It seems to have, I don't know, I can never fully tell how much this is my perspective and how much of this is actually a meaningful insight, but it does, to me, feel like these sort of post-punk bands have, I don't know, almost replaced indie bands in the consciousness, but maybe it's just because I'm just not interested in the current indie scene, I don't know.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Like, if you go to, like, record shops, things like that, and looking at recent records, like, for the sort of guitar rock section, yeah, what you'll see is, like, post-punk bands, like all the ones we discussed, like Idols, Wet Leg, Fontaines DC, things like that. Yeah, that's kind of the current mode of indie. Sure, there are people doing like indie and things like that. I think that when we were like at uni and things like that, when it was very much like the Strokes and stuff were like really popular, there was this big influence of 60s revivalism, things like that happening, which I think is like kind of lends itself more towards like indie and things like that. Now it seems to be more like 70s influence, which is usually like heavier, rawer, edgier music.
Yeah, and I never hugely got into that era of indie, to be honest. I can sort of appreciate some of the better Strokes tracks, but I didn't need a whole wave of it.
No, and it did become quite ubiquitous. And then people lost interest and moved on to something else, which is probably what's going to happen to post-punk. But, there'll always be people keep making punk albums and keeping the spirit burning. There's always people who resonate with that subculture, and there'll always be people making stuff in that vein. But what I like about Sprints is that, as well as, some great raw punk tracks, there is some like more complex songwriting, some more unusual instrumentation. So there's more here than just punk tracks for punk fans. There's, like I say, there's that evolution, which I'm glad they're going that direction, because they were great at writing punk tracks and punk songs, and now they're kind of evolving their songwriting to be good at doing other things. So again, like if you're trying to listen to some albums released this year to get a handle on this year's content before the end of the year, I certainly recommend listening to this. Yeah, I think it's dead good.
Yeah, no, sounds good. I should probably give it a look.
Cool. Anyway, so yeah, I've been listening to music. Nick, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, following up on one of my bits in this recommendation section a few episodes ago, I have now finished watching The Marvelous Mrs Maisel, the TV show on Amazon Prime about a female stand-up in the late 50s, early 60s, trying to break into the industry amid the general sexism and traditionalism of the time, and also dealing with various personal problems related to her marriage breaking down and having to move back in with her parents and deal with their various family dramas. So yeah, we did all 5 seasons of this, sort of, I think mostly because it's a show run by Amy Sherman Palladino, who also ran Gilmore Girls, which my partner is a big fan of, so we wanted to check this out and see what she's been up to. Well, that was what my partner wanted. I have never seen Gilmore Girls, so this was my first exposure to her work, and yeah, as I said at the time, I really enjoyed the first season. I think she's got a very fun, light, funny, yet characterful tone of dialogue, which is just very nice to listen to in a slightly Aaron Sorkin fashion, or similar to Aaron Sorkin. I don't think she's influenced by Aaron Sorkin, because I think they came up at around the same time, but I suspect she and Aaron Sorkin may have been watching a lot of the same things. So yeah, I've now seen the 4 seasons that follows, and yeah, I think this was pretty good all in. I think it kind of drifted from the consciousness a bit over the course of its run, as a lot of streaming shows seem to. It sort of had its big moments of relevance and virality in like season 1, got its fan base, and then they all just wandered off to their room to watch it for the remaining 4 seasons, which didn't make as big a dent on the popular consciousness. But I thought it was pretty good. I think it meandered a bit. It's difficult. Over the course of watching this show, it was definitely quite prone to meandering. It definitely had a lot of times where, instead of having a focused, direct plot, the characters just sort of hung out, bantered, and went on little self-contained misadventures for most of the season. And then suddenly, in the last 2, maybe 3 episodes, it would suddenly focus up and find some sort of common plot thread to try and build to a bit of drama, which does unavoidably feel a bit loose. And there are a couple of seasons, I think season 4 especially, where it gets so loose as to almost come undone. It's just like they're just wandering around. I mean, it's still fun. The characters are very well defined. Rachel Brosnahan, who of course we also saw as Lois Lane in Superman, is extremely good in the lead. A lot of this show is basically built on milking her charisma. And Alex Borstein, who plays her manager and platonic life partner Susie, is also excellent, low-key stealing the show, as is Tony Shalhoub, aka Monk from Monk, who is playing Mrs Maisel's dad and is also very good, as I think I said last time. I guess that's my main review of it, to be honest. It's a bit meandering at times, but ultimately very satisfying just because it's such fun to spend time with the characters.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very well written. It seems to be what a lot of people respond to, as well as the performances, is the writing. Like I say, it seems to have a kind of real sense of wit to it, which is, I suppose, what you want from a show that is about a comedian.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing about this show sometimes is, I don't think it suffers from it to the same degree as Studio 60, the show that famously was about comedy, and yet the actual comedy was rubbish, and all the entertaining and funny bits were the dialogue in the backstage parts. Mrs Maisel's stand-up routines are definitely better than the quite bad sketches in Studio 60, but yeah, the dialogue is clearly the really strong point.
Yeah. And it sounds like this has got its fan base. I suppose a lot of people coming from Gilmore Girls. But yeah, interesting summary. Now you've seen the whole thing. I suppose the sort of rambling nature, is that a function of the fact that they've got these characters and they want to stick with this sort of wide range of characters and not sort of gently shuffle people off, the plot when they don't have anywhere related to the core plot to take them? I know some shows suffer from that.
Some shows, like Stranger Things is quite bad for this, seem to just pick up lead characters as they go, like a snowball getting bigger and bigger, and then just be reluctant to ever let them go or kill them off. So by season 4 or 5 of Stranger Things, I haven't started season 5 of Stranger Things yet, but anyway, it's tried to service about 12 leads, whereas Mrs Maisel just starts with, okay, this is about Mrs Maisel and her manager and her ex-husband and her parents. They are the 5 leads, and a lot of the time their plots don't actually intersect with each other, but we're going to keep covering them all regardless, even if they go off in quite random directions. And they're all played by really endearing actors, and they're all interesting storylines, but yeah, it's a bit sprawling sometimes.
Yeah, or unfocused, yeah. That is interesting, yeah. And I guess this kind of wide range of plot is something that people like to sink their teeth into. I guess in the Gilmore Girls fandom, I know there's a lot of analysis of the plot and the different characters and core beats, so there's a lot of meaty stuff to dive into and dissect, which the fans seem to like, and looks like there is here as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to argue about. I think season 5, the last season, the show wasn't cancelled abruptly, but I think they were told you're going to wrap it up with this season, when I think they would probably have liked to do 1 or 2 more. So there's a certain sense of them rushing to finish it in the final season, which just about works. It does definitely feel a tiny bit truncated, especially because the pace before that is so, as I say, so easy and slow and rambling. You can definitely feel it when they suddenly have to actually rush to finish it. It's a decent ending, to be fair. I did feel emotion in the final few scenes, which I guess is all you can ask, and yeah, I guess I shouldn't spoil the ending of Mrs. Maisel. It's a nice ending. It's apt. It hits a certain level of tragedy without getting too morbid.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I mean, sometimes that extra pressure of time towards the end can lead to some like fast-paced dramatic payoffs. I think for Babylon 5, they'd planned a 5-season arc, and then in season 4, they were basically told you need to wrap it up in this season. So they cannoned through 2 seasons of plot in 1 season, which just makes it is just really, really fast-paced kind of action, adventure, payoff. Then they did a 5th season, which they didn't really know what to do with, and it sort of rambles off in an odd direction, but we're not really reviewing Babylon 5 right now. But that pressure of kind of wrap this up can sometimes lead to some like, okay, we need to like pay stuff off. We need to like really push things forward.
Yeah, they started playing with the structure a bit and pushing in some flash forwards to maybe get them to some of the payoffs a bit quicker, which did make it feel a bit more interesting and unpredictable, which I quite enjoyed. Yeah, there's some interesting structural plays in the last season, whereas the first 4 tend to just mostly drift through things in a roughly sort of chronological way. But yeah, no, it's a good show. It's a very pleasant and likeable and fun and a good hangout show, I suppose, which is very much what I've heard people say about Gilmore Girls as well.
Yeah.
We'll probably have to go back and watch Gilmore Girls now. I imagine you may hear me talk about that at some point in the next year or two. There's like 7 22-episode seasons of it, so might be a while.
Well, tune into future episodes of the podcast to find out how that goes for Nick, or I guess follow him on social media, where you'll probably see more frequent updates. But yeah, I'm glad that you recommend Marvelous Mrs Maisel overall. I guess it's kind of good when you get to the end of a show and you can appraise the entire thing and recommend this, I guess, to people who haven't seen any episodes like myself.
It's a good show if anyone ever fancies a bit of light fun with great dialogue, plus, a step closer to being able to cancel Amazon Prime.
Yes, yeah. Now that we've also seen Gen V as well.
Well, yeah, exactly. Just the last season of The Boys, then, yeah. What do I still need it for?
I'm generally struggling to think of another show.
Exactly.
I don't know. Maybe they'll make more Rings of Power?
Didn't watch the second one, mate.
Next up, this episode, we will be discussing Frankenstein, continuing our coverage of Netflix series of 5 films from visionary directors. This time, it's Guillermo del Toro taking on Mary Shelley's literary classic, Frankenstein. Probably the plot doesn't need any summary, but just in case it does, here's a quick plot précis. Victor Frankenstein is an eccentric scientist, genius, man of science, and all the rest of it. His experimentation takes him to the edge of human knowledge and reason, where he brings to life a creature, imbuing them with electric power and life, which he then rejects due to the creature's hideousness, and the creature is rejected by humanity. It goes on a killing spree. This obviously is not good for Victor Frankenstein and his family and loved ones. That's a very short summary of what is quite a short novel, but with quite a complicated plot. This new version was released in the cinemas recently and is now available on Netflix. We saw it recently. Nick, what did you think of it?
Yeah, this was alright. This was an unobjectionable way to spend an evening. It felt like a very safe adaptation in some ways. I felt like I was watching, I don't know, if you hear the BBC are going to make a nice period drama adaptation of Frankenstein and you tune in for it, then apart from the clearly quite expensive visuals and quite expensive cast, yeah, this is about what I'd expect. It did the story. It made some changes to the story, like that killing spree you mentioned from the book. Doesn't super happen in this, does it? And yeah, I found some of those changes a bit odd and a bit, in some ways, disappointingly simplistic. So yeah, it was fine. Clearly, effort had been put into this. There's a lot of interesting creative decisions in terms of the visuals and the way things are staged. Oscar Isaac is committed. Jacob Elordi is committed. They're very good. But yeah, I must admit, I was sort of hoping for them to really bring out some kind of new take or vision or angle on Frankenstein. And all I really had to say about it at the end was, yeah, that sure was a slightly sanitized version of Frankenstein.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most faithful... Well, I don't know. In some ways,
I'll be getting to that.
So yeah, I don't want to spill all the beans early, but I feel they made some creative choices that people who read the book will very much respond to. I think the biggest one is that the way it's structured is around a sort of framing device about this ship that's stuck in the Arctic, where they discover Victor Frankenstein, and then most of the story is him telling the events that led up to this to the captain of the ship. This is a relatively common device used in Victorian novels. Heart of Darkness has a similar structure, and I can imagine that most adaptation stuff would dispense with this. It's okay, you don't need the framing device, let's go straight in. So there are the sort of things that people will recognise as oh, I see they're doing the book as the book is. I guess that's sort of the appeal here. It's very much aimed at people with an interest in literary fiction and sort of epic cinema. Guillermo del Toro is trying to tap into those epic literary adaptations that were sort of done in the 60s and 70s films of David Lean in like Dr. Zhivago, or I'm just going to name other David Lean films, such as Lawrence of Arabia, and it's not a novel. But anyway, it's kind of got some of that vibe to it, but it's not, I feel, really like as epic as they are. I kind of wanted something that had like a lot more epic to it, and this sense of like grandeur that David Lean brought to a film. Maybe they're just constrained by Netflix budgets. I mean, it does have a much bigger budget than you say, like, sort of BBC Christmas literary adaptation, but I don't know. Yeah, all I can say is like nothing on David Lean.
Yeah, it's weird. There are some scenes where you can see them throwing the money around, like in terms of effect sequences, or there's a bit where there's a big explosion. I guess I'll just leave it there, and that's quite cool. The monster makeup looks good, but yeah, they have in a lot of ways kind of sanded the story down to a bunch of people talking in rooms. Yeah, as you say, they've used the framing device from the novel, which is I think why it does at first glance at least appear to be quite faithful, but they've also decided to cut out a lot of the monster's murders, like that killing spree you mentioned. It's quite truncated. In the novel, he kills the monster, like, full on comes back and murders Elizabeth. Spoilers for a very old novel. And, in this one, it is changed so that Elizabeth is merely accidentally shot and then Victor blames the monster. But in the book, that's a full on premeditated murder. And in some ways, as I say, it's a bit of a simplification because, there's a line where Victor's brother flat out says, "Victor, you're the real monster." Bit on the nose, by the way. Struggled not to roll my eyes a tiny bit. And a lot of the message here appears to be that Victor is the real monster and possibly the only monster. Whereas in the book, yes, Victor is responsible for the creation of a monster, but they are both monsters.
Yeah, and that is the kind of most on-the-nose GCSE English student take on Frankenstein.
Yeah, and they've changed the plot to accommodate it.
Yeah, they changed the plot to accommodate it. They also didn't have which may be a bit more forgivable, they also cut out everything involving the bride of Frankenstein. But that's to simplify it, I suppose, because it is a relatively short novel, but it's kind of weird, like, we're going to be, like, really faithful, but also, I don't know, make changes as well. So, yeah, I guess it's kind of having its cake and eating it in that department.
Well, it is what it is. It's moving it back towards the novel in some ways and far away from it in others. Like the bit at the end where I am now going to fully spoil the last scene of Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. You've heard my basic take. Prepare yourself for the film ruining spoiler. Here we go. The bit at the end where Victor dies and the monster forgives him. Again, I'm not a novel purist, but it just felt a bit cheesy, maybe. Maybe that's just Guillermo del Toro's vibe and he and I are not aligned, but I slightly rolled my eyes at that.
It's slightly Hollywood, I suppose, which, I guess the story is not a very Hollywood story. It needs a kind of emotional, kind of positive emotional payout at the end. Didn't want to end on a dark note.
Yeah, maybe I'm just a cynical monster, but I was kind of not entirely here for the recasting of this to entirely go towards the poor baby take on the monster. But hey, I gather some people really like this film, and I, to be fair, did not hate watching it. I'm not sure, some of those decisions clunked a bit for me.
Yeah, well, there were lots of things I liked about it as well. So yeah, without wanting to make this review too negative, I thought that the Guillermo del Toro's like artistic vision perfectly suited Frankenstein. It's very gothic. He does like gothic really well, and it's obviously he's got like a big budget, like, relative to kind of a lot of stuff that gets made, and he's like really like realizes these locations and things like that. Yeah, there's some like great like towers and castles and crazy Victorian science machines and things like that, and I just really feel that like his like imagination and like the way he works as like an artist and in everything, like production design, sets, costuming, music, it all really like suits Frankenstein, and it's like really good at like conjuring that very like Victorian Gothic and combining it with a sort of modern Gothic outlook. So yeah, that I thought was, it was one of those things, it was just beautiful to watch. I did see this in a cinema, it's on Netflix now, and yeah, it does look good on like a big screen.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I think some of the aesthetics are really fun. I really liked one of the first scenes we see adult Victor in, where he's demoing his ability to reanimate dead flesh, and he's got this sort of horrendous creation, which is this like severed torso that he brings back to life in a really grim, horrible looking way with electricity. And I was like, yeah, wow, that's good, that's fun. Enjoyed that. I can't remember, to be honest, if that's directly from the book or not, but yeah, it's the fun sort of scene. There was some enjoyable sort of entertainingly gothy and icky, but not too actually disturbing corpsey goth moments like that, which were fun. There's the bit where the Christoph Waltz character has syphilis, which I thought was quite funny for some reason, and the whole sequence, inevitably, the inevitable it's alive sequence where he actually reanimates the monster. Obviously, Del Toro knows that's, the part of the film you can really sell, and he does go all out on it, and it is really good.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And I did enjoy the twisted, half dismembered corpse. Again, very gothically valid. And as you were saying, yeah, Christoph Waltz is good. I thought there was a really strong cast, high budget cast, with a lot of familiar face. Yeah, Oscar Isaac basically doing the full, like, kind of mad genius thing. Really good. Mia Goth, I enjoy her in almost everything she's in. Great, ironically, gothic actress, both in terms of looks and, like, a range of interesting and sometimes very disturbing horror movies. She's been in Christoph Waltz, yeah, as discussed, great actor. Charles Dance turns up, so does Ralph Ineson. And Jacob Elroy is, yeah, considering he's like a sort of classically handsome heartthrob actor, he has a very interesting filmography. We really enjoyed Saltburn, which we gave a good review to. He's great in Euphoria. He was really good playing Elvis in Priscilla. So he's turned up in a lot of movies and TV shows that I really rate. So it's a really strong cast. So yeah, no expense has been spared in that department, which I really thought did add something to the film, that like, you feel this is like an epic adaptation when it's got like a lot of like big familiar names in it.
Yeah, no, it's a good cast, and as I think I said earlier, they are all going all out on it. Oscar Isaac really contributing to making Victor Frankenstein look just full on sweaty and tortured and being an absolute dick. As I say, this is a film that's very much committed to the Victor is the monster message, and Oscar Isaac very much helping sell that by just trying really hard to just be incredibly unlikable. I haven't fully moaned about a film being too long for a while, but this film I felt did go on a bit. I did find myself slightly checking the time by the last half hour, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, I did feel the pacing kind of dipped a bit. I mean, again, it's very much from the novel, the bit when the monster lives with the family and the blind man. Kind of like, obviously it's a key part of the novel, but I was kind of feeling like the pace is slackening a bit here. We're properly into like post, monster rejection moment, but before like obviously the climax. So yeah, I mean, yeah, again, it's quite a long film, but that did add to the sense of the epic. I did like the fact that like it was done like completely without irony, especially like in the performances. Oscar Isaac is doing this like big, I'm in a gothic literary novel type thing, playing like this like iconic character, and there's not a hint of like sort of like knowing wink to the audience. Obviously there are bits when like the themes are laid out in a very like obvious way, but yeah, there's nothing like, I feel his performance is played for humour, even though it's quite like big and almost like camp. I did appreciate the fact of like the sort of the lack of irony that sort of runs through the whole thing. I guess it's, or maybe a better way to put it is sincerity, which also I feel like Guillermo del Toro brings to like, no, we're doing these tropes in this way, like straight up, which I did really like.
Yeah, no, I think the sense of, as you say, sincerity and straightforwardly doing the sort of goth thing. Like, there's some bits earlier in the film where you see Victor Frankenstein's childhood, and there's the bits where his family die and are buried in these, like, elaborate coffins, which are quite nicely staged and quite genuinely sad. And you're just invited to really invest in this whole story.
Yeah, those were some very good scenes. So there is good stuff to watch here. And so if you've got a Netflix subscription, and if you like sort of literary adaptations, if you like the novel, if you like Guillermo del Toro, if you like any of the cast members we discussed, and you've got your Netflix subscription, watch this. It's a good thing to see over Christmas. I suppose it is largely takes place in a sort of snowy wilderness, which you could argue is Christmas themed if you kind of got a goth Christmas sensibility. If you've got your Netflix subscription, this is something I would recommend watching just to see what they've done with it.
My recommendation's slightly cooler, but it's definitely an interesting artifact. I was definitely curious to see how they had adapted Frankenstein in these times, and they've definitely made some choices, It's an interesting thing to see. I honestly don't know if it's going to be on my favourite films of the year list. It might sneak on at the bottom just because I haven't seen that many films. But yeah, this was alright. This was interesting. If you want, really deep, heavy analysis of this, by the way, I'd recommend listening to the Overinvested episode about Frankenstein. This is very much their sort of thing, and they do a good job. But you may be able to spot some of the points I've made somewhat influenced by having listened to that podcast.
Yes, and also if you want what I feel is a much stronger take on the novel, with also some familiar faces, the National Theatre production, the famous one that had Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller in it, is as good as people say it is. It's on the National Theatre at Home app. If you hadn't read the book, or you have read the book and you're interested in adaptations, and you watch this and you think, that was alright, then go for the National Theatre version because it's a lot better.
Yeah, no, I watched that during COVID. It was good.
Finally, this episode, we will be discussing the second season of Gen V, a spin-off from The Boys, sort of violent, dark superhero show that we've praised a lot on this podcast. This season is set at college, specifically Godolphin University, a college for superheroes in the Boys universe, and follows the plot of the main characters uncovering conspiracy at the heart of the college, and why it was set up and how it relates to the main character. It stars Jazz Sinclair, Lizzie Broadway, Maddie Phillips, and others, and is available on Amazon Prime. We have seen the complete second season. Nick, what did you think of it?
I thought this was a bit middling as well, to be honest. It's not a good fortnight for flaming hot takes from me. I do remember enjoying a lot of the first season for its sort of silly, over-the-top satire and commitment to roasting the sort of American university stage school vibe, but it felt like they'd lost a lot of that specificity and it had just become a bit of a overly serious, vague thriller. No whimsical school material, just them looking into this mysterious conspiracy. Obviously, one of their main cast members, Chance Perdomo, sadly passed away between seasons, which, I don't know, maybe they felt obliged to tone down the big, silly, cheerful vibe a bit after that. Well, it was never cheerful, but the silly, over-the-top, tee-hee-hee stuff. But still, yeah, I must be honest, I found this a bit of a trudge. There's a few good, big, silly, yeah, we went there, boys moments, but overall, yeah.
Yeah, similarly middling response in that this was entertaining enough to put on after a long day's work and have some sort of escapist distraction in the sense that it's got an engaging plot, it's got a lot of humour in it, it's got some very violent, gory scenes, which I do appreciate. But yeah, it's not something that's really going to stick in the mind very much. Yeah, it does feel very much like it was a sort of generic conspiracy thriller. There's evil going on at the school run by the massive corporation where there's something sci-fi magic going on. It's not exactly breaking new grounds in any department.
Well, yeah, but it's pushing one of the main characters towards a vague chosen one vibe, which is something I've somewhat seen enough in my sci-fi fantasy shows.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And that is the majority of the plot of this season, is digging into main character Marie and her backstory, her origin, how it relates to the wider show and I guess the wider boys universe, which, yeah, is interesting. It's stuff. Obviously focus your most meaty plot on your main character, and then the other characters were kind of just, I feel like, a bit there just to sort of be on this adventure with her. I felt the last season did a lot better job of building up these characters and kind of each one having like something usually psychologically ongoing with them. So, such as the Lizzie Broadway character was, has a superpower related to bulimia, which obviously is a problem for young people, especially at university. Yeah, there was a lot about mental health and things like that. So some of the other core characters in the previous season, a lot of that was dispensed with in this season. That like there's less about like the pain these people are going through, how it relates to their powers, the people that they are. I know they felt they'd kind of done most of that in the first season and didn't have anywhere to go with this. But even the fact that the main character's power relates to self-harm, even felt was kind of just like basically mentioned a couple of times. It didn't seem like much of a character point. It wasn't much of her overcoming her problems with self-harming. It was more about the classic accepting yourself as the chosen one, embracing your identity and your destiny type of thing, which everyone's seen in a lot of superhero fantasy shows before.
Yeah, I don't know if I even found it, acceptable escapism, to be honest. I did find myself, again, clock watching through quite a few of the episodes. The plot does move along. There's a quite good twist in the penultimate episode, which I didn't see coming and was quite impressed by and caught up in for a few minutes, although the finale doesn't really do that much interesting with it, especially towards the end, when it gets a bit too caught up in tying back into the boys for my liking. I guess I don't feel the need to spoil the absolute last second of the show, but yeah, the last scene of this episode was a bit of an eye roll for me in terms of pandering boys continuity.
Yeah, I did feel that this season on some level felt that like a boys side quest, I guess is how I describe it, or even again, if this was like a Victorian literary novel, this would have been the sort of, in the kind of Victor Hugo sense, this would be the bit when like there's two chapters that are away from the main plot line, in this the main plot line being the story of the boys. Yeah, this is like additional chapters that basically shoot off in this wide arc and then loop back. The sort of thing that will probably be edited out of a contemporary novel, but the Victorians loved their digressions. It did kind of feel that kind of vibe, in that you were waiting for basically the connection with boys continuity in like the first episode and the final episode.
Yeah, and is there going to be a third season of Gen V, or is this basically all building up to these characters showing up for a few scenes in The Boys Season 5 and my partner not understanding it because she watches The Boys but doesn't watch this?
That's exactly the vibe I got from this, especially as the next season of The Boys is the last one, apparently, so they're just going to tie it all up, I think. That's the vibe I get.
It doesn't feel like it's energetically spurting towards more stuff. Like they've basically, again, vague implied spoilers for the ending of this, I suppose, but it kind of doesn't feel like there's much more to do with the university setting, and I don't know what else you do with the characters. I mean, I don't know, maybe this massively succeeded and got in huge ratings for Amazon Prime, in which case I'm sure they'll make a new season anyway, but it doesn't feel like one is particularly necessary.
No, exactly, yeah, and it doesn't have the cultural impact of The Boys. It does feel like almost like we're getting more into damning with faint praise. Like, it felt a bit like boys' seat warmer content, such as like, well, you'll get some Gen V this year, even because you won't get a full season of The Boys, or any season of The Boys.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, none of the boys' cameos did a huge amount for me. Hamish Linklater turns up playing a villain. He was good. I like him. He does this sort of blank, sinister thing quite well. It's quite a I don't know, it felt like quite a standard villainous character, but we see a lot nowadays. This guy who's sort of ruthless and evil and sort of quite enjoying it, but not too much. And Hamish Linklater's very good at that, so that was fun, I suppose. Clearly, as you might be able to tell from my tone, this didn't really connect with me on a deep level.
No. I guess similar to the Frankenstein review, I guess there's like, to say some positive things about the show. Yes, I did enjoy the twist that you alluded to. Again, no need to spoil that here, but I did not see that coming, and I thought that was quite a good twist. I did also think that the plotline involving Jordan, was quite a good plotline, and this actually brought in some of the stuff I liked from the first season about exploring characters like identity and mental health. That I quite liked as well. Obviously, they looped it in very much with kind of America's culture wars right now. So yeah, part of the Jordan character, like their power is that they can change biological sex and obviously gender roles as well, and it's coming to terms with the sort of person they want to be. And then obviously there's a lot of how like the American public are served up this person as a villain, and they're sort of vilified because they have ambiguous gender and are breaking down sort of like gender rules, which again, really on the nose. I mean, I'm not going to criticize The Boys or Boys adjacent media for being unsubtle about its politics, because like it really has got to the point of like, Homelander is like a Nazi. He wants to like exterminate people who aren't like him, or his followers are like the alt-right in America, and even with slogans like "Make America Super Again" and things like that. It's not subtle, but I did like that they're willing to actually like go there and basically saying that like, no, you conservatives are the villain for hating on a genderqueer character. Like, that is it. Like, there is no way you can like shuffle out of what we're trying to say here. So I appreciate and respect them for doing that, for basically putting the politics like incredibly unsubtly at the centre, so that even the biggest MAGA idiot can see that they are the villains of this piece.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of episodes in the middle where, they focus in on the Jordan character a bit more before they somewhat pivot back to this Chosen One storyline with Marie, which I think are probably some of the strongest bits in this season. There's a big sort of ridiculous cage fight sequence, which is, I guess, the climax of that storyline, which is genuinely quite dramatic. And there's a bit in the previous episode where Jordan is forced to give this speech to the student body and to do a bunch of the most depressing, limp, trans pride, corporate cliches imaginable, which is quite tiring and depressing in exactly the way that The Boys' stronger bits of satire are. So yeah, that was a good bit. That was them maybe getting back to their roots a little bit there for at least a short while. Yeah,
so there was some good stuff to praise in his season. The other thing too, I don't know about praise, but certainly discuss, is that there is The Boys' signature humour, which is rude and crude and violent. I felt that like there were certainly elements when they really college frat boyed that up a lot. Yeah, lots of people getting naked in sort of hazing rituals sort of things. A character dresses as a baby for a while and then gets horribly murdered. There's a lot of college frat pranks and stuff, including obviously one character whose superpower is that he can suck people into his arse, who is just there basically because that's just a rude college frat thing.
On the one hand, I think that is, I guess, part of what the Gen V arm of the franchise is satirising, that sort of
frat culture,
vaguely American Pie line of humour. But yeah, it didn't, in a weird way this season, it didn't really feel like their heart was in it. Like, they didn't really commit to it in a really over-the-top, silly way. It's just that once every episode or two, the man with the infinite bum turned up and just emitted something else.
The man with the infinite bum. Yeah, that kind of sums it up in sort of like glorious simplicity, better than I ever could. But yeah, the other thing about this is that like, although they're clearly like satirizing frat culture, I don't really see what they have to say about it. They don't say much about how, say, frat culture relates to like the wider politics, such as this whole kind of you can say anything and do anything, nothing's off bounds, how that ultimately like leads to fascism, the 4chan kind of culture, or like how it's related to provocateur artists, things like that. I mean, there's a lot I think to say about how like, again, like college frat culture is connected to like politics, and again, and why these places where we're supposed to be teaching people how to be like visionary leaders of the future, and they spend most of their times hitting massive bongs and shoving things up their arse. There's something to be said there, and I feel they're not really saying much or know what they want to say, other than basically like, this is set on college, we have like the boys' sense of humour, so we're gonna have grotesque superheroes doing stuff with bombs. Like, that's kind of it, really.
I think that stuff was there a bit more in the first season and was maybe tackled a bit more, but in the second season as you say, has maybe become a bit more of just a backdrop.
Yeah. I kind of see how they linked the boys' humour to frat humour. That works in the terms that, like, it is funny, but I felt, again, like, I don't know, if they want to say things, they can. Yeah, they just didn't have much to say with it. That's all I can say. But, like, it certainly seemed to be, like, a prominent part of the show.
Well, yeah, ultimately, the last season, at least during its better bits, felt like it was about something. This just feels like it's about its own continuity, which I'm just not that interested in. I don't watch The Boys or adjacent Boys media because I find the continuity and the storylines fascinating in themselves. The only reason The Boys occasionally works is because it actually does successfully hit on something satirically or have some point to make, and a lot of this does not feel like it's making those points in an interesting way.
Yeah, be it superheroes in media or American fascism, at least, like, The Boys feels like it has something to say.
Well, I do remember saying that the last season of The Boys also felt like it had kind of started to run dry a little bit, and I was glad it was finishing.
Oh yeah, hopefully they'll wrap it all up with a good final season next year. In that case, it will probably be one of the best things that Amazon Prime has made, but this might be a stumbling towards the end. But I kind of feel like, all right, you've had your fun with The Boys, let's wrap it up and have a good ending, or else it will just be kind of like tediously spitting this out because it's popular.
Thank you for listening to Moderate Fantasy Violence. If you have enjoyed this episode, then why not check out our website at moderatefantasyviolence.com. We've slightly upgraded it in ways you will not be able to notice. You can read lots of exciting articles and listen to our previous episodes, and if you enjoyed that experience, then why not leave us a nice 5-star review? Thank you.
And after you've visited our website, why not follow us on social media? You can find us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence, or on Blue Sky, where we are at MFV Podcast. And then once you've done that, you can follow me on a whole range of social media platforms by searching for Alastair Ball on Instagram, TikTok, or Blue Sky. You can also visit my website, redtrainblog.com, to get more writing, and you can get my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com.
And you can also follow me at nickbryan.com on both the internet and Blue Sky, and nickbryan.com written out with the word dot on Instagram, where you can hear all about my self-published comics. The convention season is pretty much over for the year now, so I'm retreating to my cave to write more comics. But if you want to buy some, you can go to my Gumroad shop, which is linked from my website, and both of this year's new comics, Wobbywart and Sold Number 2, are now available. Bye.
They make great Christmas gifts.
Yes, they do. But if you wait till this comes out, you will need to buy quickly. And yep, apart from that, I will be back, of course, along with Alastair in a fortnight for the next episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, in which we will be covering the new Benoit Blanc whodunit movie from Ryan Johnston, Wake Up Dead Man, and also the third season of The Diplomat, the political comedy drama that we enjoy from Netflix. See you in 2 weeks for that. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.